over the last few weeks, I have been seeing a lot of hubbub about War Thunder players and all that, and I'm sure you guys have too. And the reason being is because the leaks have continued to happen for classified or restricted information regarding military, planes, tanks, and just other miscellaneous technology. And obviously, this has become quite a problem. It kind of gives War Thunder players a bad name, a funny name, and a lot of people, for better or worse, have been saying that War Thunder players are a special breed, a unique breed, because who else, outside of people who really are dedicated to their video game, to their favorite video game, that is a free-to-play game made at this point in Hungary, who else would go out and spread classified or restricted information on public gaming forums? Who else would do that in order to try to improve their vehicles? And that kind of brings me to the point of this video. With these leaks happening somewhat recently, though, of course, going back, if I'm not mistaken, to October 2021, where the first leak was of a Challenger 2 cannon breach, if I'm not mistaken. Will they continue to get worse? Will they continue to happen with more frequency? In essence, will they accelerate in how often it happens? And the short answer is yes, I think they will, but I'll kind of delve into why I think they will. And yeah, it's going to become a big problem for War Thunder fairly soon, if it has not already. Now, that said, for a quick background on the problem, over the last few years, we've been seeing War Thunder players leaking information, some of it being classified, some of it being restricted, some of it being just publicly known information that people thought was classified or restricted, but for the most part, it's been restricted or classified in some way, shape, or form. But this has been happening more or less since, again, October 2021 with the Challenger 2 leak, in which, if I'm not mistaken, it was a Challenger 2 crewman that put online some information regarding the specifications of the cannon breach. A little bit thereafter, within a few weeks, maybe about a month or two, we saw a Leclerc 2 crewman posting information regarding the turret rotation speed, again on the Leclerc. Now, some might argue that this one is a little bit not as bad as the Challenger 2 crewman because, of course, you can simply look at a video of a Leclerc's turret rotating, and there you go. You have your approximate turret rotation speed. So that one might not be as bad, but still, classified or restricted information. Then we got one about a Chinese APF SDS round, in which it went into details regarding specifications such as velocity and, if I'm not mistaken, armor pen of that shell. And it was in an attempt from a player to get a more accurate shell put into the game. Now, the thing is, being that that is China that we're talking about, if that was a Chinese citizen or even somebody in a surrounding country that released that information, they probably do not have that person existing in any state records anymore. That person has been wiped off the face of the earth. They no longer exist in our reality, in our plane of existence, because of how quickly that government works, especially when it comes to state secrets. They are not going to take something like that lightly, and trust me guys, it has been happening with other vehicles, and just because we saw it happening with Western vehicles doesn't make it a good idea to do it with all vehicles, because either way, if it's a Western country, an Eastern country, somewhere in between, that country is not going to enjoy you spilling their state secrets regardless of the level of classification. And we are just seeing it now where we are getting into more modern vehicles. Of course, we saw it happen with tanks first, and that is no coincidence that the first leaks were regarding tanks, because tanks advanced more quickly than planes in War Thunder. For example, a tank like the Leopard 2 PL, brand new, if I'm not mistaken, that was put into service within the last 3 or 4 years. The T-72 M2 Moderna, for example, again, in the last few years. Even the M1A2 Sepp Tusk has been put into service somewhat recently, that variant specifically, within the last few years. And these vehicles, with the exception of the Tusk, have been added more recently than things like the F-16, the MiG-29, so on and so forth. And so you had this more modern tank core that you could access in War Thunder than you could with aircraft, and as a result, you had more classified information, more stabs, I guess you could say, that Gaijin would take at trying to get the information correct in-game. But the thing is, they cannot get the information correct in-game for a lot of these modern vehicles because it is all classified information. And the thing is, with classified information in War Thunder, Gaijin has a strict policy against using classified information. So even if you spread that classified information to their forums, so even if you email it directly to Gaijin, they cannot use that information. And if the government that you are spreading their documentation, ask for your name, address. Gaijin has it on offer. They might very well provide it to that government in question in which you are trying to spread their documentation. So because of this, and even though Gaijin has said numerous times, especially since that initial Challenger 2 leak, they cannot use any documentation that you provide as long as it is classified, restricted, or even questionable. They are not going to use that to change any of the functions, any of the values, anything about a vehicle in War Thunder, which is why you have things like the Tiger 1, for example, the Sherman, for example, the P-51 Mustang. Those are well-documented vehicles. Most of the documents regarding them have either been declassified or are just well-known based on various features. They are well-known vehicles, and of course you can get the values correctly. Now, whether or not Gaijin models them correctly, that's another story, but the values are otherwise well-known. Now, what we've been seeing over the last few weeks specifically is ever since Gaijin released planes like the F-16, the MiG-29, and even to a point the A-10 and other vehicles like that, we are seeing a more modern Air Force coming to War Thunder. And before these planes like the F-16, again, the MiG-29, we saw planes like the F-4, the MiG-21, MiG-23, for example, kind of being the crowning achievement, the pinnacle of technology in War Thunder insofar as aircraft were concerned. Of course, you had some outliers there that might have been more modern than those vehicles, but for the most part, the F-4s, the MiG-21s, MiG-23s, so on and so forth, around that era, kind of mid-Cold War era vehicles that are no longer produced, still serviced and used in other countries, in some second world countries, for example, but are no longer produced and just kind of are upkeep and maintained. You saw those vehicles in War Thunder. And the thing is, most of the documents regarding those are no longer restricted or classified. So it's not really a big deal if, for example, you said, oh look, I've got this flight manual from an F-4C. You can release that. I'm sure that that's not classified information. You can even buy an F4 online. Trust me, I've looked. You can buy them. And again, while we had the F4s out, the F5s, MiG-21s, MiG-23s, we had tanks that were 30, 40 years newer, at least in terms of their variants and their upgrades, in War Thunder already. Now we're starting to see planes catch up to it. F-16s, for example. Again, MiG-29s, soon to be Su-27s, Su-35s, Su-57s, maybe even in the far future. And heaven forbid, once we get to it, F-35s, F-22s, we might see those, or the Eurofighter Typhoon. Do you know how much classified information there is regarding those? People are going to leak that information because regardless of how often you tell them, how big of a stage you tell them, people will still leak that information because, oh, Gaijin got it wrong. They're always going to get it wrong. These vehicles are so modern that they cannot help but get it wrong. They can take a guess, but one of the great things about War Thunder and modern vehicles, I guess technically kind of great, in theory it's great, is that Gaijin can take a stab at it, but really with these vehicles more than any other vehicles, they can manipulate the stats and everything in order to make the game as balanced as possible. Whereas, for example, a P-51D-20, that has fixed values that they cannot manipulate. They might be able to change the model here and there, but those values are fixed, and they have to figure out a BR in which it can fit. With a modern aircraft, more or less, of course, you have your standard things like, oh, well, we know this can go Mach 2.3, but of course, they can kind of say, oh, well, you know, its turning capability is this, that, or the other thing. And that's kind of the beauty of War Thunder, in a way, being a simcade game. They can, to a point, manipulate it insofar as those gray areas are concerned, and they will happen. Those gray areas are everywhere because, of course, they don't have the information. And again, as said before, we cannot leak classified information to Gaijin because they cannot and will not implement it into War Thunder. Which brings me to the point of this video. Will these leaks keep occurring, and how much will they accelerate? Yes, they will, and they will accelerate quite a bit. So again, we are just starting to see it where we are getting into modern aircraft. Again, the capping planes that we had for maybe a year or two were things like the F4, the Harrier, things of that nature, where more or less they were figured out. We already knew what the specifications were, if not exactly, pretty close to it. Nowadays, because we have the F-16 still in production, the MiG-29 still in production, variants therein, once we get into more modern territory here with those aircraft, into more modern variants of those aircraft, aircraft, and things like the F-15, the F-18, we are going to see a lot of people releasing substantially more classified, or if nothing else, restricted documentation so that Gaijin can get these vehicles correct. But again, the thing is, Gaijin will never get these vehicles correct because they are too modern. They simply cannot. They can guess, and most people will be plenty happy playing the planes that Gaijin kind of guessed some of the specs for. But people who worked on these vehicles, people really who for some reason have classified documentation, even if they did not work on these vehicles, will be more than happy to try to spread that online, say, oh, Gaijin got this wrong, here's why I'm right. It makes no difference to Gaijin, and you should be banned, and you will possibly even be charged with crimes in your country simply to win an internet argument, just so you can get maybe an extra 5 kilometers range out of a radar, or maybe 2 more Gs out of a missile. You are going to get banned from Gaijin, potentially from War Thunder, and also possibly charged and thrown in prison for a few years. And also, worse yet, if you value the lives of your fellow countrymen, you could cost your fellow countrymen their lives, especially in a war, especially if the documentation that you leak is serious enough. Now, thankfully, I don't think we've gotten to the point where the documentation has been serious enough where they're literally leaking state secrets, but I would not be too surprised if we get to that point somewhere soon. And at that point, it becomes a legitimate concern, and at that point, you are jeopardizing War Thunder in total. There could be a point where, kind of like TikTok, and I know I hate TikTok, but, let's just draw a comparison here. TikTok is more or less Chinese spyware. There could be a point where, let's say the US says, hey, what are all these leaks doing on War Thunder? Why are they telling people about the Tusk package, for example, or maybe one of the more modern variants of a Super Hornet, or maybe even worse yet, the F-22 or F-35, fairly secretive planes? Why are they giving that information out on these forums? They could, for all we know, and I know this probably is a stretch, but treat it like the dark web, where it's like, whoa, this is some sort of an espionage information ring, and we have to shut it down. Boom, because you leaked that information, you might jeopardize people's access to War Thunder, even your own, because I know a lot of people who leak this information are likely narcissists. And the funny thing is that when you get into it, even if 0.01% of the War Thunder population has this information, and even a percentage of that decides to leak it, that's still several people. It doesn't matter. Like, you can't say, oh, well, the entire player base is this, that, or the other thing. All it takes is a bad apple, and once you start getting a bigger batch of apples, which is what we've been seeing, especially as we've been getting into more modern territory, there are more players than ever, the chance of a bad apple increases. The chances, at least, that you see a bad apple will increase, and that's what we're seeing, and that is specifically why we are almost due for an acceleration in these leaks, because we are getting into more modern vehicles, we are reaching a wider audience for War Thunder, there is a larger player base than ever. If you want, maybe even check out one of my videos, actually, I recently did, where I compared how War Thunder was, I believe it was in 2021 versus now. They've seen numerous times the player base that they used to see, even just about a year and a half ago. It is remarkable, especially for a game this old. And the thing is, because the player base is growing, and again, because we are getting into uncharted territory with planes with very much classified information, you will see it accelerate. I'm not sure by how much. I don't know if this is going to become a weekly thing, a monthly thing, but up until somewhat recently, it was kind of every few months you'd see it. But over the last month, we've seen 2, 3, 4 things leak. It might happen more and more often, or people might just kind of share the same exact classified stuff for giggles. It might become a meme. Who knows? Don't do it, guys. It is in no way good for you. It is not good for your country. It is not good for War Thunder. War Thunder will come under scrutiny from the countries in which their classified information is being leaked. So if you care about this game at all, especially if you have put thousands of hours into it, and don't just be an edgelord and go into a game and say, man, this game sucks, and you've got 4,000 hours into this game, then of course you like this game and you want this game to succeed. So don't just be like, oh, I want to crash the game, I want to ruin it for everybody. It makes no sense. You like this game, don't just be an edgelord and try to ruin it for everybody. Seriously. Again, I don't think it'll get to that point where countries outright ban War Thunder, but hey, who knows? If it becomes a point where people are leaking F-22 documentation, the F-15 documentation was recently leaked on a plane that's not even in War Thunder yet, as a way to try to get Gaijin to add accurate information for War Thunder. So just don't be stupid, guys. You are going to possibly get yourself in trouble, other people in trouble, Gaijin into trouble, War Thunder into trouble. Just don't do it. They will not add the information into War Thunder. And again, at this point, it will accelerate. The problem will likely accelerate because we are getting more people in War Thunder, which means likely more people with access to this information. And also we are getting more modern vehicles in War Thunder. Even still with tanks, we are getting more modern variants in War Thunder of tanks. And thus, a lot more of the information about more modern vehicles will of course be classified, which means that of course we should never release that information if you have access to it. But that being said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I didn't really expect this video to last as long as it did. This is my third iteration of the video, and trust me guys, it is by far my most lively and coherent version of this video. So yes, let me know again what you think about this video and also this problem in the comments below. And also, if you like, please consider liking this video and subscribing because that helps me tremendously. Either way, thanks again for watching everyone, and just don't be stupid. Don't leak classified information. Don't try to get classified or restricted information. It doesn't matter. You're not going to be helping anybody, and it just makes you look stupid when you're just trying to put this online in a video game forum, trying to win an internet argument, when you could probably legitimately sell state secrets for tens of thousands of dollars to a country that's willing to buy it. But either way, thanks again, and take care.